Okay. Welcome everybody to today's Grow With Us. As a reminder, we are recording today's program. I'm Daisy from the Dallas Public Library, and I also help with the Seed Library. Okay, it looks like we're ready to get started. Judy, if you want to do the introduction for today.
Yes, hello. I'm sorry I'm the voice in the cloud today because my camera won't turn on. These things happen when we do these virtual programs, and so we didn't want to delay. I am Judy Schmidt with the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability at the City of Dallas, and we are one of 70 plus departments and divisions operated by the City of Dallas. And what we work on every day are environmental issues and concerns, and we're so glad to see you here. Welcome, everyone. And we're very excited to be partnering with the Dallas Public Library and the Seed Library to bring Grow With Us to all of you. This is a free and virtual program that we put together and try to have on at least once or twice a month. So hopefully you'll join us again. Today, is all about sun-loving plants, and what a perfect topic, because I think we're all seeing that only the sun-loving plants are doing well in our gardens right now. But before I do an introduction for our wonderful speaker, Rusty Allen, I just want to mention that in Dallas, the policy is 2 times a week watering. And that's very important because, as we face this hot temperature, we do want to keep our homes and our landscapes going, but that's the policy is 2 times a week. You can use soaker hoses, you can lay hoses on your foundation. Please do that to keep it moistened, and so that you don't get those big cracks that could possibly cause trouble down below your home and in your pipes. But saving water is so critical right now. Every drop of it that you can save is really important. And that's something that we talk about, and we've gone to many summer camps this year at recreation centers. And we've been able to talk about this wonderful watershed that we're in here in North Texas, and about saving water and how to do that. So one of the main things in Dallas is, if you have any leaks, please fix them. If, as I say, 2 times a week watering, you can water with your hand sprinklers and your drip irrigation, all the things you need to do to keep your home safe. And with that, I'm now going to tell you that we're so pleased and delighted to have Rusty Allen with us from North Haven Gardens. He is the Education and Outreach Coordinator for North Haven Gardens and is a North Texas Master Naturalist, as well as a Texas Certified Nursery Professional. He has a really varied background in retail and design and horticulture. He is just such an expert when it comes to all types of plants. And in this case, he's going to tell us all about and educate us on sun-loving plants. So, Rusty, would you please take the virtual platform? Thank you and welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me today. This is a great afternoon and another really hot afternoon, and I appreciate being here because I want to let everyone know you can plant plants, and you can plant them right now if you would like. I totally get it if no one wants to go outside at this moment and start planting, but I'll tell you a little bit of things that you can do about maybe getting ready to plant and maybe wait for this fall, because you do know that there's lots and lots of plants. I've got quite a few here today that are drought tolerant, that grow in the sun. And there's a couple that may be needing a little bit more water. But the most important part about all these plants really is that we have to get them established. And when we're talking about perennials, which is what I've got a lot of here today, these are those plants that give you benefits for year after year after year. You must get them established, and that's really going to take about 2 years or so to get their good root system going, and then they become drought tolerant, or maybe even fully drought tolerant, like a lot of good Texas natives can be too. So with that, let's get into some of the things that we've got here. I want to tell you about different kinds of plants. Some are going to be the perennials, and some may be just plants that you can be growing right now in the sun. And we can't leave out edibles, so I'm going to do just a few things for you about edibles. And we do have, of course, Okra, there's probably no plant that tolerates more sun than okra to give you, of course, the fruit that you're going to be able to eat. And it's a beautiful plant. It's actually a hibiscus, which is a very cool thing. And I'll show you another one I brought today too. But okra is definitely a plant that's growing right now and still producing for you. Another one that we've planted probably in early spring are the peppers. And there's a lot of different kinds of peppers you could be growing. And you can see some actually that are growing on this plant right now. But here's the key on something like peppers and a lot of other plants. Once you've got them planted from spring, they may be waiting. A lot of our tomatoes are pretty much done and we're starting to harvest tomatoes and that's great. But something like a pepper is going to take a little time now because it's getting so hot. When we get above the 90s and 95 degrees of temperature, the flowers are not going to set. So you won't have any peppers probably until fall. So the key here, like a lot of plants, is just to keep them healthy, get them to that point where the temperature breaks. And then we all feel better, not just the plants, but we feel better too. Here is the plant that everyone should be growing right now for foolproof color, and that's vinca. These are the annual plants of vinca. There's also a ground cover too, but they come in many colors. Today I brought some reds and some pretty corals, pinks, and there's whites as well. This is the plant that you're having difficulty with in a sunny spot that's hot and dry and you want color. It's vinca. This is what you're going to be looking for. The plants that are also available right now that is an annual plant are pentas. And some people think pentas can tolerate as much heat as vinca, and that's actually not true. The pentas really like just a little bit more shade than something like a vinca. But the really gorgeous thing about them are these groups of flowers that look like shooting stars. You get reds, you get pinks, you get whites, lavenders, and different lilac, different colors, and it draws butterflies really, really well. So anyone that's interested in butterflies would love to have some penta. I would say, hey, let's probably give them some morning sun and then some afternoon shade, and you'll probably do a little bit better. Let's move on to some perennials that are here today too. I was just out of town not too long ago, and I saw some of the salvias. And this is one of the really beautiful blue salvias, and some are annuals and some are perennials too, but they're growing beautifully right now in a sunny situation, full sun to part sun. Remember really that a lot of these kinds of plants love sun, but you're probably going to have to give them protection from hot afternoon sun or reflected heat. Reflected heat is something that comes from a porch, a patio, a sidewalk, maybe a part of the building or a fence, and that's different than sun. Reflected heat and sun are different. They love sun to bloom. They like to get out there so they can have flowers, but reflected heat can really be a problem. Something like this plant is what you're looking for. If you're really into butterflies again, this is going to be the milkweeds. And the milkweeds, this one is tuberosa. This is one of our Texas native plants. This one is one that is a larval host plant and a nectar plant too. So adult butterflies come to the beautiful flowers. And then of course the caterpillars of monarch butterflies and others will be eating the leaves to give them some food. These are also great plants in full sun and good drainage. So remember when you're doing these kinds of plants, most of them really like great drainage. And I'll talk to you in a minute about how to prepare for them. Most of them want to be in dry soil. They don't want to sit in water. Here, of course, is a yucca. This is the Color Guard yucca, one of my favorites for bright color. And it really shows very, very pretty. It's a little prickly, but not quite as prickly as some types. Again, another beautiful plant. This is a variety of a Texas native. They have beautiful blooms, as you probably know, most yuccas on a big stalk that comes out of them. Another very, very attractive plant. Let's move to something a little bit different, and that's the cannas. And the cannas are terrific plants. Some of those grandmother favorites, like they sometimes call these plants, but the cannas are being bred differently a little bit now. They're a little shorter. This is the Canova series, Canovas, and a really pretty orangey color too. These types of cannas still have those beautiful broad leaves, sometimes burgundy in them, and they give you height. They give you drama, especially in the background of a garden. These are being bred to be a little shorter with more flowers. The cannas that we all kind of grew up with were maybe 5 and 6 feet. These are a little easier to work into your typical residential landscape. Get you probably about 3 to 4 feet, different colors. Now, look at those big leaves. This would tell you a little dead giveaway here. Large leaf plants like this, as opposed to small leaf plants, really need more water. So cannas are one of those plants that to support all this, they'll need a little more water for them. But typically our soil holds moisture, so we do pretty well with them, and you don't have to worry too much about them. Once they're established, they're pretty drought tolerant, which is a great thing. Moving to another plant that I bet you know, a lot of cities, including Dallas, have understood that rosemary is a terrific plant. Of course, it's a herb. It's something that you can use for chicken. You can cook with it. We all know that, and the wonderful fragrance that it has. But it's a very drought tolerant evergreen shrub. And a lot of our shrubs don't tolerate it as much as rosemary can. And you get a beautiful needle look plant, which we don't have much in our landscapes here. Most rosemaries get to be big. They can be 3 to 5 feet by 3 to 5 feet wide and still be fully drought tolerant. There's some I've seen on the east side of town near Whole Foods, and they're smart. They have a nice food plant outside, and it's an evergreen shrub. So it's always there and always great and drought tolerant. And if you don't have room for the big 3 to 5 feet, get you the trailing rosemary. This is a great plant to put at the very front of your bed, maybe right at the very front, from one that maybe tears back towards your fence. This is almost a trailing, crawling kind of rosemary. It only gets to be about 2 feet wide, and you can still use it in the kitchen, which is really, really great too. I want you to see something else that I like a lot, because I like wildscaping, like drawing butterflies and plants like these that are Texas natives. And I hope you can see this yellowy orange coloration that's here on this plant. And this is called flame acanthus. Flame acanthus, or Anisacanthus is the actual botanical name. But what do you need to remember? Well, you need to remember that these are big plants. Number one, they can be 3 and 4 feet high and wide too, like the rosemary, 5 feet wide. The typical plant has an orangey red flower. This one is more of a yellow color, and I like it both quite a bit. Small leaves. Again, that should help you remember that it's going to be a drought tolerant plant. And tall and wide, as I said, and blooming like crazy in a very, very sunny spot with good drainage around the 4th of July. Once we get to be about the middle of July, you have these beautiful tubular blooms. And either color that you get, the main attraction is hummingbirds. And so if you're into hummingbirds, like I am, this is a super plant for that. Most of these, as I said again, are perennials. This one and a lot of them, you'll have something during the winter. We call these a woody kind of perennial, where it has a little bit of a wood construction to it, and you can leave that. And then once it's established, like mine, I cut it back about, every 4 years or so, cut it way back, just a few inches above the ground, and then it gets very large again, very quickly. This is what I call low maintenance plants. That's just trimming it back once a year, which is really, really great. Here's another one you don't see too often. This is called Damianita. Damianita. It's a really neat plant in that it has a fragrance to it. It smells very herbally when you first get that. And then the yellow flowers here, of course, attract very many different kinds of pollinators, small butterflies, small bees. And this is a plant that must have good drainage. It does not like to sit in water at all. And what you could do is you can put it, say, with something like your rosemary toward the very front of a garden, toward the very, very front, because they're only about this tall. And you get some attraction for butterflies up close where you can see them. Other plants, this is one I like to talk about a lot. This is a plant that one of my friends says, if you can't grow this, I can't help you. And this is rock rose, or Pavonia. And the rock rose is a terrific plant. This plant is a mallow, In other words, these are the plants that actually like moisture, but once they're established, they will actually be very drought tolerant. And the Pavonia, of course, the main attraction here are these beautiful, bright, hot pink flowers that brings butterflies and different kinds of bees to it. And it has a more of a shrubby kind of construction to it, and it can vary a lot. Here's the neat thing a lot about Texas natives like this one. And a lot of Texas natives are adaptable. So you can lean back a little bit and relax because most of them will take a little more sun or maybe a little more shade or a little more water or a little less water, and they'll still do great for you. And this is a very tolerant plant of that. I've seen this plant 4 feet high and 4 feet wide. I've seen it even bigger than that. Because it does like moisture, you can put it at the edge of a downspout coming off your gutter and maybe gets a little more water from time to time. But it grows in so many situations. It's a super plant. What I do with mine is I cut it back kind of hard every couple of years or so, and you get a quick resurgence of beautiful new growth, very lush. And right now it's blooming in my landscape too. This is a great plant. Here's another one that's growing right now. You'll see it a lot. It's growing in my garden too. And this is Rudbeckia, you know, Echinacea, right? The cone flowers. To me, the Echinacea and the Rudbeckia are two of the best plants that you can get for a garden. And that's mostly because of these lots and lots of flowers. Most of them are going to be native to a large area of the United States. And they all attract butterflies very well with these landing pads, as they call them. They're sitting up here waiting for butterflies to come to them. Many types of bees and bumblebees all enjoy them. Again, this is another true perennial. Like a lot of them, it will go to the ground during the winter and then come back every year for you. There's several different cultivars. Hopefully we all know that word, a cultivated variety, which means one that's been bred to be different heights. And some of them have larger flowers or different colors, but they're terrific. Definitely something that you want if you're into butterflies and wildscaping, which I like a lot myself. And you'll see another one that's probably the king of that in terms of bringing some of the great butterflies, and that's mist flower. This is Greg's blue mist flower, and it has a great name because they do look very misty. It's kind of delicate little tufts of blue flowers, and they have lots of nectar in them, and that means it draws butterflies. And for some reason, it's a favorite of male monarch butterflies. They come to them in droves very, very often. They're blooming like this in my garden right now. You also see some queen butterflies coming to them. The thing about this plant is very unusual compared to some of the others. It's a ground cover. It actually spreads very quickly once you get it out of this container, and you can give it some room and let it do its thing. It doesn't get much higher than this, which is terrific. It's drought tolerant once you get it established, and you get a low maintenance plant, again, possibly toward the front of a garden that brings the butterflies right up close where you can see them. Quite a few that bring wildlife, huh? Here's one that a lot of people know and enjoy very much as an annual or perennial, and that's lantana. And I bet a lot of you are knowing this plant because you'll see it in a lot of places. I just got back from the hill country down toward Georgetown, and down that way, they had Texas native lantanas growing. This one's called Dallas Red. So there you go. There's one that's named for us. And it has this nice orangey red colored groups of flowers like all the other lantanas. This one though, like many of them, if it gets really cold, it may act like an annual and you may lose a couple. But if it doesn't get too cold, it gets established, you may keep it year after year. So it turns into a perennial. And this is definitely a plant that's very drought tolerant, blooms all through summer wonderfully, brings wildlife, of course, to your garden. And this particular one will get you about 3 feet high, maybe or so. So it's a good size. You could use it in a lot of places. I like that very much. I wanted to kind of show you something that we don't see too often. I'm going to bring it around so everybody can see because it's big. And that is another hibiscus. I promised you another hibiscus for you. And hopefully you can see this beautiful red flower. This is the Lone Star hibiscus, and some people call it Texas star. And it leads some of us to believe that it's a native, and it's actually not. But it's still a wonderful plant. And the Texas star comes from that 5-pointed star from the sepals behind the petals, as you can see here. It's red. There's a white one you sometimes see, but it's still hibiscus, like the ones that we're used to. Some are perennials and some are annuals. It has this beautiful kind of a Japanese maple blooming, a leaf here that you'll see. And when they're blooming, they're green. And then about late summer, early fall, sometimes you'll have some of these leaves starting to drop. And like a Japanese maple, they may have some color on them, which is really pretty. So to me, that kind of adds to it. Large flowers like this, of course, bring lots of wildlife. I see a lot of bumblebees on mine, for instance, and some butterflies as well, too. This is an unusual plant, like a lot of hibiscus. Remember, we talked about the okra here a moment ago. They can take more water or not. So here's another one that all you have to do is get it established. For instance, I have some of this plant growing in a water garden. So its feet are actually in water, believe it or not. And it's about 6 feet high and blooming like this and looks beautiful. Or maybe we do like some of the other plants we mentioned a moment ago, we put it at the base of our downspout coming off the house. It gets water from time to time, and then it does a little better. Or you just let it get fully drought tolerant and it will go great year to year. You'll probably go ahead and cut it down to just a few inches. This is a woody perennial, and each year it will come back. Lovely plant. I like this one a lot. I wanted to show you a couple of plants that are here that are more typical, that are growing in full sun. And one is just Mondo. I came from South Texas, where we call Mondo monkey grass. Some of us call Liriope, the bigger leafed, taller one, as a monkey grass too. But regardless, they're all great plants. They're all both evergreen. But I like the Mondo a lot because it doesn't get too much higher than this, maybe about 10 to 12 inches. It will grow in almost full sun, and it will grow in almost total shade. So that's a very nice broad spectrum for the lighting situation for this, and being evergreen too. And perhaps, you know, like Liriope, it has those little grape-like flowers that pop up in summer. Again, this is a full ground cover. You can see it almost here trying to spread out of its little container. This is great for large areas, nice and low maintenance. And then once it's established, you can mow it, which really, really makes it even more low maintenance for me. The other one I want you to know about is very cool. I don't have much plant to show you, but I have a rhizome here, and this is the roots of daylily. And daylilies have been around for generations. And perhaps if you drive around, you may even see some in abandoned home sites and cemeteries, and they're blooming and they're doing beautifully. And you can buy daylilies as a potted plant, much like these if you like. But at North Haven this year, we were able to get just the rhizomes. These are the bare roots, which will establish very easily too. Would like you to plant these in a container to get them going. And come this fall, you can set them out. And of course, this is a beautiful red one, for instance. They come in many, many colors, but you remember that they're called daylily for a reason. They have beautiful lily-like flowers, and they last one day, but another flower comes and another flower comes. And they're low maintenance, drought tolerant, great perennials. Here's a little tip on some of these kinds of plants too. There's roses, for instance, daylilies, and some other kinds of plants, irises. And if they have really dark purple or dark red flowers, they do better with a little bit less sun, because that sun gets absorbed by the dark colors. And sometimes they don't do quite as well, but still great full sun plant that looks wonderful in a cottage garden. The neat thing too about the daylilies and the irises, as you probably know, they have that grassy kind of form to them. They have that different leaf that makes a nice contrast in a garden space. Here's another plant that I like a lot for a ground cover. And you're starting to see more and more of it. This is a dichondra. There are Texas native versions of it. This one's called Silver Falls. Silver Falls is a super name for it. It comes straight down, what I call like Rapunzel, just like the hair. It goes straight down like this in a container and looks beautiful. Or, of course, you could grow it on the ground. This is a true perennial. True perennial is a kind of perennial that goes to the ground all the way, and you probably won't see it during the winter and then pops right back. These are doing beautifully in my garden. I have several in containers. This silver construction of it is a beautiful contrast between just about any kind of plant. Sometimes it looks great underneath small trees or a larger pruned up shrub that looks like a tree, and you have it as this low mat growing underneath it. It's wonderful. It does like full sun. There's a point where it can get too much sun, say the reflected heat. Remember that? When you have reflected heat, be careful. Some plants don't like the reflection part, but once they're established, they do like full sun and the drought, which is what we're after, right? We definitely want these plants to take the drought, and we don't have to coddle them as much at all. I did want to show you at least one true tropical today, since our theme is sun. But our theme to me is also thinking about low maintenance, so it's easier for us. And that's plumeria. Do y'all know plumeria? I wanted you to see the beautiful flower that's here. This is the Hawaiian lei flower. It has a little sweet, nice fragrance to them, and the ones that they string into leis in Hawaii. It's a true tree there. It actually gets much larger than this. You may get it to be a small tree for you here, but it's a tropical. And whenever we talk about tropicals, I say the magic temperature, which is 45 degrees. So once it gets to be around 45 degrees, most tropicals, like a lot of our house plants, are in danger of getting some damage. So they have to come inside. I've seen this in protected patios get larger, but you would definitely have to keep it in a container and wheel it in when it gets a little bit bigger. They come in many colors. We have a beautiful assortment of these plumeria that just came in about a week or so ago, and really, really pretty. I think I've hit most of these kinds of plants for you. This really shows you a nice rainbow of colors, number one, right? And then we also have this great variety of texture. So it's not boring. A lot of people are thinking, still, if I have to have a drought tolerant full sun garden that I don't have to water, it's going to be cactus and rocks. And that's obviously not the case. I've shown you quite a few here that when you get them established, there are going to be low maintenance and drought tolerant and still take a lot of sun. But that means you have to get them established, right? We talked about that. So establishing these plants, in our soil is mostly going to mean, as I said, making sure it drains. Our soil, most of us around here have this heavy blackland prairie clay soil, and it's good soil in terms of having nutrients, but it doesn't drain. And in the winter, it's cold and wet and heavy. And a lot of these kinds of plants don't care for that. So the things that you're going to want to do is to change the drainage part. So let's talk about that first. And if you're not aware of expanded shale looks like rocks. And it's actually a type of shale that's been mined and then heated so it pops. And it's permanent. This is great. You take something like this, you work it into the soil, and it puts air back in the soil. That's really the only thing we need for a lot of these kinds of plants. If you come to North Haven Gardens or any garden center and you want to open up your palette of plants to choose from, drainage. An expanded shale will do that for you. 1 to 2 inches in a given bed, maybe 3 to 4 inches if you want to do a little bit more variety of plants like succulents or cacti or something that really likes a lot of drainage. This is what you're looking for. It's terrific. And then preparing soil. And say we're going to wait on these things, and y'all are interested in maybe staying inside right now and planning and figuring out what you want to do for fall planting, then let's maybe think about getting the morning and start turning an expanded shale. And maybe this product. I don't do lots of products. I try not to think about, you have to buy this product for me to do well in gardening. But the Biotone Starter Plus from Espoma, The Biotone product is an all natural, all organic product, and this is a starter fertilizer. And it's wonderful and because it has bacteria in it. We know that plants need bacteria in their roots to do well. And this is included in the soil. It must have contact with the roots down in the soil to help the plant get over transplant shock. This is the kind of thing we're after. Remember, we said many times, once these plants are established, once we get them taken care of, they're going to do better. This is going to establish them quicker, and it's going to give you low maintenance. That's what I'm after. The other thing that I always do is the root stimulator. This root stimulator that we carry here is a seaweed-based product. Seaweed's good for us, for humans, and it's also good for plants because of the hormones and the nitrogen in it. And this particular root stimulator combines the seaweed and adds a biostimulant. And all you know about biostimulants is, again, it takes the heat, the drought, and the cold tolerance of the plant and drives it up. The plant gets that transplant shock out of the way, and they get established faster. That is my number one tool, the root stimulator for sure on any plant. And when I have my plant and I'm going to plant it, I'm going to soak it in a solution of that root stimulator and then get it into the ground, probably with that expanded shell, right? And it's going to do a lot better. Never plant a dry plant into dry soil. It's not going to do well for you. And of course, the other thing that we turn into our soil, I usually say this when you're sitting in bed at night and you go, what do I need to add to the garden? What is it? This is the soil need. Compost. Always think of compost. And what would you want compost for? Well, again, we're going to try to lighten the soil up a little bit. If you have your own homemade, homegrown organic compost, use that for sure. You can buy it too, but this provides organic matter in the soil. There's two of the things that we really like in our soil. The major one always think about is the drainage part with the expanded shell. And then you want organic matter. That's what all plants use to actually construct their plants, the rest of their structure, and leaves and stems and flowers and fruit. You need organic matter for that. And then your final step. What's your final step, everyone? We all should know it's mulching. I know the city of Dallas and all of us gardeners are going to say to you, mulching is going to be your secret. This is your final step. The last step after I've planted my plants, after I even have an established landscape too, then I'm going to want some kind of a shredded bark mulch in general. So in this case, this particular one I have is hardwood. There's cedar mulch, you've probably heard of that. There's pecan shells. There's other types, but the important thing is that you're just going to mulch. They may appear differently. Pick the one that works for you. The hardwood mulch is one of the easier ones to find. This breaks down into soil. So remember, we're feeding the soil. The plant's going to get better year after year. But the most important thing we're thinking of now, of course, is keeping that soil from getting too hot or too dry. 3 to 4 inches probably right now around these plants. Make sure you don't pile the mulch up against the tree. It's very important. The base of a tree, you want to make sure it slopes away from it. And then you have enough mulch there to help maintain the moisture. If you're just installing mulch for the first time on one of my new plants here, then make sure that the plant is watered first. Yes, the plant's in the ground, you water it first and then apply your mulch and then lightly water again. This is our best insurance to make sure our plants get through this really tough period, and then come fall, they'll have a little bit of break, maybe a little bit of rain and a little bit of less temperature, and they'll do better. I always check my mulch in late winter, early spring. We're getting ready to get for the growth and for summer. And then I check it again come fall, getting ready to go into winter. And of course, the winter is a time we want to keep the soil warm. So the mulch does both of those things for you. And then a lot of people have asked me about, what do I do now? If I don't do a lot of these beautiful plants, and I just want my plants to get better and not be so stressed because of the heat. Well, one of the things I like to do is to do a foliar spraying and program, as we call it. And what would you want to do this for? Well, you want to get your plants wet in the early morning if you can. Now, the plants I don't wet are something like roses or vegetables. But remember that the plants are not getting rain, right? The one thing that we really would like to have. And the rain washes off some insects, it increases the humidity, it gives the plants a little bit of nitrogen in there, and it's also slightly acidic. And so all of these attributes to rain makes it great for the plants to rejuvenate them. Perhaps you're seeing plants right after rain, your garden, and you go out in your landscape and it looks like it took a breath and it looks a little fresher. It's because of the rain part of it. So what I like to do is spray the plants in the early morning. I want you to use an uplifting motion, like with the sprayer here, like I have. And that's because underneath these leaves on most plants are little openings, these little pores that are here. And that's how plants breathe. And when plants are storing enough moisture and doing okay overnight, and it starts heating up, as it heats up, the plant closes these pores because it goes, oh my gosh, it's going to get too hot. I'm going to conserve humidity and moisture, and they close up. But in the early morning when they're open, the plant has the ability to take in things. It can take in fertilizers, and it can take in things like a biostimulant, like that word I used for you a moment ago. Here's one, and this is the one I'm going to recommend to most of us right now. So if you want to spray one thing, seaweed, back to the seaweed again. This is a concentrate. You're going to mix it up, put it in your sprayer. And again, remember, we're using that uplifting motion. So we hit those pores underneath the leaves here. We're washing off maybe a few insects. We're washing off the dust and the pollution of the plant. And the plant gets a little shower and it feels a lot better. And the other thing you can do too, with this kind of seaweed is drench it. In other words, you can put it in a watering can and drench it around the base of the plant too. Those are two ways to get these plants kind of doing just a little bit better. How often would you do it? I would say once a week. So once a week in the morning, if you could get some of these plants just washed off with a little bit of seaweed, they'll do a little better. And here's one more thing I wanted to show you in a variation of that, and that's seaweed with fish emulsion in it. And I know a lot of us probably remember fish emulsion as a very common fertilizer, and that's what it is. It's a nitrogen-based fertilizer. And yes, this does smell a little bit like fish. It doesn't smell like the ones they had when I was a kid. But these are better now. So if you want to have a little bit of nitrogen to your seaweed, you'll get that little bit of feeding that the plants can actually use. I don't want you to feed anything right now. So in terms of putting out a fertilizer, your lawn, all these kinds of plants can't use fertilizer right now. They're conserving moisture, they're conserving energy, and the microbes that are in the soils that makes the nutrients available to the plants are also in low activity mode, just like we are. It's too hot. And the same thing happens in winter. So remember, the spring and fall, we're all thinking about planting in those two times of the year is because that's when the soil is more active and the weather's more conducive, and these plants will do better for you. So if you're not ready to plant, I get it. If you want to go ahead and plan to plant, as we say, then get you some expanded shale, some compost, some of that Biotone Starter Plus, get that worked into the beds, water it, mulch it, lightly water it again, and then run back inside. And then try to stay as cool as you can until, I don't know, maybe the city of Dallas can tell us it's going to get cooler, what, the 1st of October, hopefully, maybe, something like that. Hopefully this is a great introduction to some different plants that maybe you're not aware of. We have lots of wonderful plants like this. All of these are in stock right now today at North Haven Gardens. And we have a staff of garden advisors too. And all of us are gardeners. We're all growing something at home. So I know we can tell you about what we do that will help you be successful if you come and see us. It's time to start planting if you can. Okay. Thank you so much for having me here today. I hope y'all enjoy it.
Thank you so much, Rusty. That was, I learned so many things today. That's amazing. Yes, thank you. I didn't realize that it takes the 2 years for the perennials to establish. So I'm so glad to know that now. And it
Yes,
makes sense. Of course, it just totally makes sense. And just so many things that you said. The other thing that I want to say is if you go to the garden center, sometimes it helps to take a picture with you or take a picture 2 times of the day, like in the morning and in the afternoon, so you can kind of see where that sun is going, what it's doing. I've done that. I have to consider that at my house because I have, of course, sides of the house that in the morning are in shade and then they get the west setting sun. And so it's a whole different plant that can tolerate that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
North, south, east, or west, of where the plant is facing helps a bunch.
Yes. So I know there's some questions in the chat and let me see if I can get to the chat
Sure.
and see what some of the questions are. One of them is, how do you manage weeds in the pollinator beds? Can you plant flowers that help prevent the weeds?
There's, in general, desired plants, because a weed is an undesirable plant. But desired plants can shade out or outcompete weeds, yes. So there is that point. There's not a magic plant to plant, unfortunately, that will stop weeds. But your better bet is a combination of things. So anytime we're talking about controlling something, whether it's cockroaches to fleas to weeds, we always want to hit it in different ways. Some actual different kinds of modes of being able to do the control. So one is, of course, planting and making sure that the plants are going to be covering the area where they might pop up. Then hand pulling, unfortunately, is always part of something for weed. And then that mulching and making sure you're maintaining at least a 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch on most plants year round will help you a lot with weeding. Now, the other thing about weeding too is a time thing too. So late winter, early spring is probably the best time to pull a lot of weeds. It's got a little bit of moisture still left in the soil, and you can probably get them before they get a lot of energy. Right now, they've gained lots of energy because they've had a chance to grow during the year. Your second best time to pull weeds is going to be fall for the same reason.
Yeah, and for me, I know this sounds, probably some of you are going to say, no, I'll never do this. But in the spring, when we have those soft, gentle rains, I know my neighbors think I'm crazy, but that's when I'll go out. Especially if it rains like more than one day like that, I'm out there because it's so easy to get them out by the roots. And I just pull them out then. And so I don't have a lot of weed problem. And that's one of the things that I do is just, and some of them, some of the weeds, the other thing you can do is if they're annuals, just don't let them bloom so that they, cast more seeds. I know most of us don't have this in our yard, but if you happen to have ragweed in your yard, it's an annual actually. So you can do that with many of them, but basically it's a little bit of just getting out there and maintaining. Yeah.
You have to be present sometimes.
Yeah, have to be present sometime to get out there and get rid of them for sure.
Right.
So Hannah said that she thinks you called it the orange blooms, and she wanted to know if that can do well in a pot as well. And if so, how often does it need to be watered?
We're talking about maybe the Anisacanthus with the orange, or were we talking about the Vinca? Do you have an idea?
Hannah, are you still on? Can you put in the chat? Was it the Vinca or the?
Maybe it was.
Maybe just tell us about both.
Okay. So in general, these couples of plants that we had here are a little bit different though, but the canna here is going to be that most intense orange of probably that she was maybe looking at that I'm seeing at this moment. This is going to be the plant that can take a little bit more moisture. Sometimes it wants a more moisture if you would like, and maybe about 3 feet in height. If we're talking, again, perennial, so it's going to come back year after year. If we were maybe talking about the Anisacanthus with little orange tubular flowers that brings the hummingbirds, this is going to be definitely 4 to 5 feet or so, and then 5 probably. Mine is about almost 6 feet wide, so it's a
wow. Mm-hmm.
But another good plant once established will definitely bring the hummingbirds to it. if we really are doing different plants here, so if maybe she's thinking, maybe she just likes orange, which is fine with me. This kind of orange coloration that I think is very pretty is also in the vinca, and this vinca would give us an annual. So we have really 3 different kinds of plants here that would give her maybe some of the orange. But remember,
Now,
all
the vincas are good in containers also, right? So many of
Yes.
these, there's another question from Stephen, how many of these are good in containers?
how many are,
Several of them.
you know, what's not good in containers is plants that really want to get out of it. And that's really going to be something like the daylily I mentioned, my little short little piece of daylilies, because they really are a ground cover. They want to expand out. And something like the mondos and the dichondra that we mentioned too. These plants really are ground covers. Now, the dichondra, since it really goes to the ground during the winter, it kind of minimizes itself. So it can take containers well. As I said, I have several of these in containers. It looks really, really pretty. You'll do well with most of them. Another plant I would not do in a container, I'm doing this the opposite way, would be something like the mist flower, because it wants to get out of this pot. You can feel this right now. It's heavy with water, but heavy with roots. And this plant really wants to start spreading. And
Wants to get going. Mhm.
yeah, and any plant that's got a woody construction, which is more tree-like, it's going to outgrow a container pretty quickly. Annuals have small little root systems. They don't get much bigger than this over the season. Our plants are going to do best in a container. And here's another one that doesn't like a container, and some plants have this, and that's a taproot. And this milkweed has this very developed taproot that wants to get in here, like trees and other plants, and it won't tolerate a container for too long. But succulents and things like the yuccas here and many of these other plants, certainly the rosemary and the others will do well in containers. Yes.
Yeah, my milkweed is so beautiful this year. It's really big and just blooming away in this heat. So there's a question from Deborah about Texas natives and perennials. I believe that you said that some of them you could plant them now, but it's best to plant in the fall. Is that right? Or do you wait until the spring?
Well, you can plant all of these right now if you wanted to. Now, remember, some things are a little different. That would be something
You have
like.
to baby them for a few days. Yeah.
Say again?
You just have to baby them for a few days if you plant them right
Yes.
now.
People ask me, what is the difference? What changes? The level of maintenance changes. Now, you can't turn your irrigation system on and expect your new plants to be watered. They're going to have to be watered by hand. Someone's going to have to go out there, water by hand, which is allowed, of course. But otherwise, I would wait until fall and start thinking about what you would like to do. They're going to establish much better for you this fall. If you have what we call the right plant, right place. And then if you have especially the native Texas plant, that's a drought tolerant native Texas plant. If you get that in this fall, you're still going to be doing some hand watering to get established, come next summer, but not nearly as much. It's more difficult to establish a lot of plants in spring. But remember, here's one thing that does change, and that's the availability of the plant. So if you really like
Good point.
you may not see some of these first thing in spring, and you definitely will not be seeing the vinca. Annuals are always planted when you see them for that season. The other plants that we show here today are perennials, and they keep going year after year.
Now, I know you've gone over this, but Kelly was asking, it is, best to water the plants not in the heat of the day, correct? It's better to water them. You've mentioned several times, water them early in the morning right now, or possibly later in the evening.
Right, if you can, if you come home at lunch or you're out there in the middle of the day and the plants are wilted, water. What we're trying to do is just to keep the wilting over and over again kind of thing to a minimum. The morning would be your best time to water. And here's also part of it too, that if you're using a sprinkler system, but the reason why City of Dallas and many other cities have these rules is because once it really heats up or you're using sprinklers that throw water into the air, they're evaporating. So a lot
It just evaporates.
getting to it. And here's the other thing, the plants can't use the water. If you started doing all your watering in late afternoon when they actually measure the highest temperature of the day in shade, the plants can't use it because the plants are going to have to cool down first. These openings in the leaves are gonna have to open, the roots are gonna have to wake up a little bit, and then it can take up the water. When it's really, really hot, plants can't actually use the water well. It's not gonna be able to come out of the wilt probably until the middle of the night, and that's
Mhm.
not as good. So whenever
Yeah.
you I always advocate water in the early morning. Your best times to get it done is somewhere around 6 and 7 a.m. and get those plants having the moisture already in them so they avoid the wilt when you come home.
That makes so much sense. So, with the irrigation systems, or even if you're using a hand sprinkler, what we recommend, of course, there's hours of the day you're not supposed to be watering after 10 o'clock in the morning or before 6 o'clock at night. And again, it's for that reason, for the evaporation. And then something else that we recommend, even as I say, if you're putting a hand sprinkler out to water a certain section, don't water it, for an hour all at once. It's really better to use your zones and stagger it out, your times, get to know your controller if you have a automatically sprinkler system. And when I started doing that several years ago, I learned it from a Grow With Us presentation, actually, from a speaker, that what you want to do is, for example, set your first zone and your first time, say at midnight, for 5 minutes. So all your zones go for 5 minutes. And then you wait an hour, and then all your zones go again, maybe for 5 minutes at 1:30. And then you wait an hour and all your zones go again at 3 o'clock for 5 minutes. So what happens is, first time is probably a lot of it's going to roll off the land. But the next time, some more is going to soak in. And the third time, even more is going to soak in. And then that actually helps make the roots be able to go down deeper, a little deeper, and makes them stronger. So it's just a really good plan to do that as well, to learn that. So if you haven't learned how to program that, or even, like I say, if you're doing a hand sprinkler, don't leave it on for an hour in the same spot. Go turn it off, wait an hour, turn it back on for 30 minutes. Yeah, so there's not a whole lot of runoff.
Yeah, if it's a single plant in a container, or if it's an area of the landscape and you know that it's gotten very, very dry, yes, it is better to do a little bit of watering, let it soak in and come back to it. Once containers, I have to do a second full watering, and the tail end of that second full watering, a lot of bubbles will come up. And if the bubbles come up, then it's a real big giveaway that the plant got too dry. And here's the other thing I may say real fast too, that if we have a landscape where there's some kinds of lawn diseases or other fungal diseases that are present, or you think it might be present, it's best not to water in the middle of the night. Try to get it done later, or make sure you get the fungal diseases or those things addressed first. But otherwise, yes, spreading the watering out is a very good idea.
So here's another question. Do you recommend the Texas chop for perennials in this heat if they were planted a little late this season?
Yeah, some people are calling this the Texas chop these days, which is, I think, something that they came up with in England, in the Chelsea area of gardening, which is the Chelsea chop. But it's really the same thing. And the basic, I guess, here's one plant we can maybe just show it a little bit more of a visual. The plants in my garden that a lot of are doing this kind of thing are salvia, like the autumn sages. And if they're in between bloom and they have, this is not a perfect example, but if they have some naked stems here and just tiny little blooms on the top, then you can do a light shearing of them here. And a lot of plants just need that light shearing in between to do better. Texas natives and a lot of good perennials that have been established. Remember, again, we're talking 2 to 3 years, they're established. Yes, they will take a bigger chop, say something like this Pavonia, the rock rose. And a lot of times I'll take it back by about a half or so. But remember, the reason why we're doing this is to get the plants ready for a fall bloom, when we hopefully have these plants with a little bit of coolness, a little bit of rain, and the fact that they bloom again. If it's a plant that doesn't necessarily bloom again, you're not really helping it very much by doing a lot of cutting. But quite a few perennials, yes, will actually use that Texas chop kind of method to cut them back.
One more question. Can I transplant established vincas now, or should I wait?
I'd say, do I transplant established vincas?
Now, or should I wait? A question from Clifford.
Well, Clifford, here's one thing to remember. We said a moment ago that these annuals, this is their root system. They live fast and they die young. And we're in the middle of the year, right? We're halfway there. So these plants were probably put in as soon as they probably got them available, which is when it was nice and warm, probably in May or so. And they're trying to get established here. And if I took it out now, when it got a little established and then try to put it somewhere else, it's not going to like it. Your better bet might even be to get a new one for that newer spot and put it in. But still, remember that new one's going to need probably more attention, more water than even this one. I know I said that there's not much root system, but it's still a little annual and it's already done its thing. It's already gotten established for you over here, probably early in the season. Transplanting now can be very tricky, but you can do it, as we said, if you pay attention to the maintenance part of it. And if I may, the big thing here too is to get the root stimulator and soak that plant in root stimulator and then plant it. And then mulch it, and you'll probably do better.
All right. Well, we are approaching the top of the hour, and this has just been remarkable. I have learned so many things. And it's so nice. I see some things that I'll have to go shopping this weekend. I'll have to come visit because I see some things I want to go get. So thank you for this. Any other questions before we go? Please join us again. Thank you so much for your time. This has been most helpful.
Thank you. I'd love to see y'all again.
Thank you, Rusty.
Bye. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Daisy and team. Appreciate it so much.
Thank y'all.